The Orleans-Borbon. It's not difficult.
The Orleans-Borbon, it's not difficult for you, it's difficult for me. I have trouble because I've got names wrong, had names wrong before, and it's so embarrassing. Okay. Good morning. I'm here with Alvaro de Orleans-Borbon, who is a member of the Air League, a member of the committee. He is totally involved with gliding, and I'm so interested in the subject. I've been a part of the Air League myself, and I know Alvaro has always been a member. Haven't you? You've been a member of the Air League?
Christopher Foyle called me once. I don't know where we met. I think at an old car show or something like this. We discovered we had a common interest in aviation, and that's where it all started. I liked Christopher a lot. He was a very good man.
He was an amazing individual. I had a similar experience. I met him at the Metropole Hotel when he first told me about the Air League in Monaco. A charming, warm man. It's sorely missed, sorely missed. So you have had a fascinating career in respect of gliding. But before that, can you tell me a little bit about your background?
It's very simple. I grew up in a family, in a house with a garden outside of Rome. 76 years ago, I started. And then I studied initially at home for various reasons. My brother was ill, and so we could not afford to have a sort of COVID isolation for 10 years. Wow. And then I went to the Swiss school in Rome. Then I went to a boarding school where I then progressed to the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. From there, I went, because I did not like completely the syllabus there, I went to study electronic engineering in Rome, where I did fairly well. I then spent 1.5 years making the equivalent of a doctor thesis, although it's not a PhD, building a radar. That was the second in Europe, the second acoustic radar to explore the lower troposphere. I simply wanted to get a device to show how thermals are formed in the morning, because I started gliding. So I tried to make together the study and the pleasure, and it worked well. And then I started in a completely different field, building plants for construction materials, and the rest is history, so to say.
Well, let's talk about gliding. As I say, I'm fascinated by it, and I can never quite figure out how something without an engine can actually find a place to land. I'm familiar with paragliding, which again fascinates me. I don't know how you can jump off a mountain and find a patch of soil, a designated patch of soil to land on. Can you tell me a bit more about gliding as a subject?
It is very simple. Like a ball rolling down a hill, it will continue rolling until something stops it. And the glider will glide along the air until it hits the ground. And the whole purpose of the pilot is to make sure that he does this enjoyably, and that he defers the contact with the ground, the inevitable contact with the ground, as late as he can, or his wives will support it.
But how does he actually control the glider itself to make sure that he lands? You just can't land anywhere. So obviously you have a destination in mind. I guess that's the thing about all aviation, is to have a destination. But you're dependent upon the wind, you're dependent upon the thermals. I guess it's the thermals. You're dependent upon all those things. I'm just curious as to how you manage to. It hasn't got any power, so you're just simply moving the rudder, ailerons, or what have you, to reach your destination. Is that right or wrong?
Anybody that has flown on a commercial airplane has flown in a glider. Because when the airplane approaches the landing strip, it essentially reduces the power to zero, or almost, until almost the last minute. And so it's gliding down the air exactly like a glider. The only difference is that gliders have no engines, at least most of them. I mean, I have a powered glider that has a small engine, a bit like a motor sailor, which is a sailing boat that has a small engine to get it around when you need it. And so gliders are depending on the mind of the pilot to find the energy to stay aloft. It is an interesting sport because you are always 10 minutes away from a forced landing, but you can still fly hours and hours and make long distances. I mean, imagine the records. We have now 3,000 kilometers without a drop of gasoline.
No.
We have
Is that possible?
26,000 meters height. That is 80,000 feet height, far higher than any commercial and most of the fighter jets can ever fly. So it is a sport that has extracted a lot from the atmosphere. We paint ourselves, when we try to explain it to somebody else, as people who play chess with the atmosphere, with the nature, because we're always trying to scrounge energy out of the atmosphere, and it requires intelligence to do so. But that is not the true picture. The true picture is much more about, don't tell it too loud to other people, we're gypsies. We're simply going out trying to beg, borrow, steal energy from the atmosphere anywhere we can find it, often without understanding why we found it, and simply go up and stay aloft as much as we can. But it is a beautiful sport because it depends from the intelligence and intuition, sometimes from the artistic sense. The best proof is that in gliding championships, two very different types of individuals win. The engineers would calculate everything and make statistics and whatever, and the artists that may have some bird's genes cannot really dependably sum 3 and 5, but understand well to steer a glider from the general landscape and gestalt of the environment that they see around them. And the two have about the same chances. And that, I think, is beautiful also because at dinner after the championship, when we exchange all our lies, well, there are very different people together sitting, and that's very interesting.
It's totally fascinating because it's such, to me, I've actually been in a glider and it was winched up as opposed to being pulled up by a plane or dropped from a plane. Is this common? How do you get in the air?
Gliders first went by simply running down a hill. Then it was accelerated by 10 people pulling on a giant elastic band attached to the glider. And when everybody was pulling very much, the tail of the glider was released and it would zoom off the hill. And then it was discovered that we can bring it up like a, how do you say it, an aquilone in Italian. That's the flying bird, what people play with, the kite, yes, a flying kite.
Oh, right.
And so we pulled up like a kite, which is delicate, dangerous, and requires a lot of understanding between the pilot and the winch operator. But it is by far the most economic way, and it's a very interesting way because it all starts from the ground. And then the more costlier is being towed by a tow plane that allows much more flexibility because you can reach the ridge or place have small engines on board. My one, for instance, is a small Wankel engine turning about 7,000 RPM. It's a very small thing like this, 60 horsepower, that disappears completely, propeller and everything in the fuselage. You don't see it when you, but it can bring the glider high. And even I have a range of about 500 kilometers with it.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, so they use the Wankel engine because they use that in cars. It wasn't successful. But I suppose for this purpose, it's perfect, isn't it?
Yes, some of them. My glider uses, the other ones use a small, the same engines now the military drones use, the Rotax engines and all the solo engines are used also in gliders too. They are noisy and have a lot of vibration compared to the Wankel, but they are more widely diffused and easy to repair, where the Wankel must be sent to the factory, but they don't break down, the Wankels.
Oh, well, that's good news. So if somebody was interested in aviation, which obviously we are because of the Air League, would you encourage them to start gliding? Is this something that you think is a good idea for any would-be pilot?
I think that gliding and their sisters, the later sisters, hang gliding and paragliding, but especially gliding, is the best way to start flying because it teaches you to really respect and understand the airframe, the controls, the stall, and so on. And then you may add an engine, which is a complication and a fire risk, I say always, that we bring along. And by that time, if you started with gliding, you understand the airplane well. People that start only with power tend also to depend on power for difficult situations, with the result that when the power fails, they feel lost. If you come to the next speech at the Air League on, I think it's next Wednesday, you will hear the story of an airline captain that was a glider pilot, found himself because of a almost incomprehensible error without fuel at 40,000 feet, and landed this big Boeing 767 with 170 people on board on a small drag strip and saved everybody. And it is a very interesting story. I mean, that I think is the best. And the one that the Sullenberger that landed on the Hudson, I don't think that he was a glider pilot, but he instantly became one when he had to. And he also made a very successful landing. So it's a good way to start flying. I think gliding is by far the best way.
Now, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you the question. Is it expensive to get involved in gliding?
Yes, it is expensive. Like skiing, like sailing, like any sport that requires a contraption, and you must displace yourself. You have cost of renting the equipment at the beginning. You have cost of traveling from there to the nearest airport or ski slope or port. So there are inherent costs. They are not cheap. They are comparable among these different sports that I mentioned, but it's not zero. It's not walking or doing gymnastics.
So this is where the Air League comes in, because the Air League, I provided money towards gliding scholarships and things like that. This is probably this is where the Air League could really help a would-be aviator get involved without worrying too much about the cost. Would you say so?
I should not be selling from the stage because I am an avid supporter of the Air League fundamentals. The Air League is a very old English institution whose idea, if I represent it well, was to simply facilitate the entry to flying for any young person. And there are two things attached to this, one obvious and the second one less obvious, and I think even more important. The first one is that it allows people first to enjoy gliding, why not? It's a dream for everybody, not gliding, flying, sorry, more generally. And second, also because it allows them to evaluate a career. Am I fit for a pilot, controller, whatever aeronautical career, and aeronautical engineer? It helps them to understand their vocation. But there is a second aspect, even more important, that is little generally spread or talked about, which is respect. Persons who learn flying respect natural laws, because the punishment for not respecting these laws can be terrible. You can even die. So you are taught things that how they works, the limits, and you respect them. And if you not, you have a severe punishment. People that know how to respect natural laws tend also to respect human laws, which normally is understood as something that you can always find a way around, you can negotiate, you can discuss, maybe. But there are certain fundamentals, like you fly too slow, you crash, you risk crashing, you stall. You do something dishonest with a human law, and you should also, and may probably have a big punishment. So people that respect natural laws, people who fly, tend to be in generally more respectful of human laws, and in other words, I submit there are better citizens. Not because they are formed, but simply they get an idea that certain things, certain limits should not be trespassed. And I think this is a very good byproduct of the Air League efforts.
I endorse that 100%. And I'm a big fan of the Air League, obviously, and support them. And I would encourage anybody to get in touch, and they can get in touch through the website. Would you say that's the best way?
Certainly, or come and talk to anybody like you. I mean, there are lots of enthusiastic people. We're trying to set up also a simulator. We have it almost done. In I think about 2 to maximum 3 weeks, it should be operational at the Air League new seat at the Stelios Foundation. So we encourage to come and visit it and talk to the people there.
Okay, well, I think that's an invitation that people should take up, because I think it's a marvelous thing, and I think it's a marvelous thing for young people to really get involved in aviation. I think it will always be expanding, even in our modern age, where people say, "Oh no, you mustn't fly." But I think gliding is different to that, and I think it's the best way of getting around, to be honest, for the future. Without
I would add it as gliding uses atmospheric energy, a bit like a fisherman that has to respect the ocean or the sea. It teaches you about the energy, the atmosphere. It teaches you about understanding the climate. It gives you a good sensation of what is meant by the climate change and so on. These are all strongly additional reasons to start flying, because it also opens your mind to many other things that otherwise may remain mysterious or less easy to understand.
Wow. I'm really totally with you on this one. And really, our time is up, I think. So I'm going to say thank you so very much, Alvaro, for this really very, very interesting interview. And I will share this as soon as possible. And once again, thank you, and see you soon at an Air League meeting.
Thank you for allowing me to talk to a very lovely subject.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish we could do another hour on it, but we can't. Okay.
Until soon.